President Obama will continue with his trip?
That's right. The president leaves tomorrow. That trip is planned. It will go ahead as planned. He had intended to meet in Turkey at the G20 with Hollande and with the other European leaders to talk about the battle against ISIS. That meeting will go forward, we are told, but now without President Hollande. George, this you could see in the president's demeanor. A real somber, this is a clear setback just at a time when he thought that he had been making progress, that the United States and our allies have made progress against ISIS, the Iraqi military finally making some progress in Iraq, of course, taking out with the drone strike last night, Jihadi John, the most visible leader of ISIS. But this, again, the president was very clear. We don't know who was behind this attack. The real fear, though, is that this is ISIS once again reaching beyond the borders of Iraq and Syria.
And John, Carl, Paris had already been on a heightened state of alert, not only because of the Charlie Hebdo attacks back in January, but because world leaders, including President Obama, scheduled to convene there later this month for a major climate change conference.
That's right. The end of this month, 120 heads of state, more than 120 heads of state, are scheduled to convene in Paris for this large UN conference on climate change. The president's plan, still on his schedule, is to be in Paris for 2 nights, attending that conference. Of course, now with France, the border shut down, state of emergency, many questions about what will happen with that conference.
And on that point, we've just learned from American Airlines that they're actively monitoring the situation unfolding in Paris. They're saying even though Charles de Gaulle Airport is currently open, American Airlines is holding remaining departures this evening to Paris until they can get additional information. I want to go to Pierre Thomas with this again. And of course, as John had mentioned, there had also been this attack, the downing of the Russian airliner a couple of weeks ago in Egypt. Greater concerns about air travel here in the United States as well, and possible gaps in the TSA system.
Absolutely. Law enforcement officials have been focused on airports and commercial security because they know that is a prime target of the terrorists. And George, we're just getting in some new information. Here in the nation's capital, D.C. police are saying that they're going to step up security at key French locations in the city. We're also hearing about the same thing in New York City. So right now, law enforcement in the United States is at a high alert, trying to respond, trying to give information to the French, trying to assist them, but also preparing for any potential copycats here.
And Pierre, what does that mean operationally? What kind of things will we see on the streets of New York, the streets of Washington, D.C., the streets of Baltimore?
For example, in New York, you're going to see these so-called Hercules team. Heavily armed law enforcement throughout the city. You'll see them in front of the embassies. You'll see them at key sporting events. There's so many sporting events in the United States over the weekend. Law enforcement officials will have to be thinking about extra security throughout the weekend, George.
And Brian Ross, we've just learned from a French police source that now 3 terrorists are confirmed killed. That number is likely to go up of terrorists involved in this attack.
If they got them all, George, there would clearly more than 3 people involved in attacks independently on 4 different locations. And that'll be the concern. Did some get away, or do they all intend to be suicide attackers and die carrying out their mission? That'll be one of the big questions. It will also give a good idea of who might be behind this.
But so far, we haven't seen any group claim responsibility for this?
There have been some claims on social media, but we haven't been able to verify them. They don't appear to come from the standard, what we see social media tweets from either ISIS or Al-Qaeda. A number of groups are starting to say we've taken responsibility. That's not clear yet. It'll take a while for that to be sorted out.
And what do we know about any kind of chatter before this attack?
Well, over the summer months, there was a lot of talk, a lot of claims that will bring slaughter to the streets of France, primarily from ISIS followers. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ISIS followers from Western Europe, from England, from France, from Belgium, who have gone to Syria. Others have stayed back, and in some cases, we've seen where ISIS leaders have said, don't come to Syria, don't come to Iraq, stay where you are. You can do more damage and more good for us if you stay in your countries.
But once they leave those countries, are these attackers kind of on their own?
They can be. Once they get to Syria, they're funneled into a whole machine. When they're still at home, they are somewhat on their own. They are not directly told to go after specific targets. In this case, it appears to be very well planned and coordinated. Somebody put all of this together to coordinate 4 separate attacks with explosives and automatic weapons.
I want to go back to Louise DeWast on the scene in Paris right near that concert hall where the hostages had been taken. That situation now over. But Louise, one of the things we know is that cafes near that concert hall have now been turned essentially into temporary hospitals.
That's correct. It's just a block away from the concert venue, and I can see about 100, less than 100, about 50 people right now inside the cafe. I can see some with blood on their shirts. They all look very preoccupied. Most of them are on their phones, probably calling their relatives. And the French president was actually just behind a few minutes ago, talking with police forces. So that's the situation right now in Paris, near the concert venue where the attack happened.
And we want to show now a picture that you actually took a short while ago showing that phalanx of police right there on the streets near the cafe.
That's correct. We could see firefighters walking up the ladders and evacuating people from the second floor down the ladder to a safe space a few blocks away.
I want to go back to Brad Garrett right now. La Libération, the French newspaper, is now reporting that the French government has announced that 1,500 additional soldiers have been mobilized. As Brian Ross was just saying, even though we know that 3 attackers have been killed, according to French police, there could be many more still on the loose. And I remember back after those Charlie Hebdo attacks, there were still terrorists on the loose, ready to kill again.
That's right. And the real key, George, is identifying the dead hostage takers / terrorists that they have, because you want to look at the network. Who else is out there? Who have they talked to on the phone? Because the key is obviously locating and then positioning troops, law enforcement, etc., based on where the threat might be. But the key is to identify the link. And that's, I tell you, that's what, desperately, that's what law enforcement is doing in Paris as we speak.
I want to go to our producer, Ben Barnier, who is actually in the stadium where France was playing Germany tonight. President Francois Hollande was there as well. When they heard those bombs go off near the stadium, set the scene, Ben.
George, yes, I am still outside the stadium, and I saw forensic investigators combing the floors for clues, for evidence, right next to the Quick restaurant, which is some kind of a fast food. You could compare it to KFC or McDonald's in the U.S. And there was the area was completely cordoned off. We could not get near the restaurant itself, but I could see police officers taking pictures, trying to find out exactly what happened. Now there is still a heavy police presence several hours after the end of the game I was attending, which was supposed to be a very happy night for the French.
So, Ben, what did you know in real time when this was happening? You would hear the explosion, but for a while the game went on.
Well, George, it was a very bizarre situation, and we were told after the game by the head of the French Soccer Federation that on purpose they didn't inform the players, they didn't tell people, they didn't confirm that there had been explosions outside the stadium in order to avoid any panic inside or outside the stadium. So it was, you could say, business as usual inside the stadium itself, but outside the stadium, clearly police were already there, were already protecting the area. And we heard sirens, police sirens, or maybe from some of the rescue operations, since it is not unusual to hear fireworks during an exciting soccer game, but this was completely different. 2 extremely loud explosions, which proved to be extremely dangerous right outside the Stade de France, largest stadium.
And in the concert hall, as we've been reporting, the Bataclan Concert Hall, the Eagles of Death metal band was playing. I'm now on the phone with Michael Dorio, the brother of a band member. And you were able to speak with your brother tonight. He's okay?
Yeah, I was. He's doing fine now.
What was he able to tell you about what happened?
He said they were mid-set playing maybe 6 songs in, and they heard the gunfire and couldn't really see because of the lights, and quickly all kind of hit the deck on the stage, and instinctually just ran to the back of the backstage through the exit doors and took off running.
So they knew right away it was they were gunmen?
They heard the gunfire and said it was louder than what they were even playing. So they, by the time they put 2 and 2 together, they could understand that there was machine guns, multiple machine gun fire.
How many people? Do you have any sense of how many people were inside that concert hall?
I believe 1,500 was the capacity of there.
1,500?
Correct.
And does your brother have any idea? He and the band members were able to get out to safety through the back door. Does he have any
Correct.
idea how many others were able to get out?
He does not. They were probably one of the first group of people to be able to exit, being that they were on a stage with, very accessible exit doors right behind them. So they could just literally turn around, go down, and leave. So I think that they were probably one of the first out.
Just focused on getting out. Before they left, and I know they left very quickly, before they left, did he have any sense of how many gunmen there might have been?
No, he did not. We didn't get that far.
And what else was he able to tell you about what happened?
That's about it. That he had, seen, heard the machine gun fire, had seen, heard screaming, yelling, and just took off.
You may not know the answer to this, but let me ask it anyways. I assume your brother tours fairly often, the band tours fairly often. When they go to a place like Paris, would they have largely an American audience or a French audience?
I would believe it would be largely French.
Largely French?
Yeah. I'm sure there's a couple of American tourists that, would be in town for an event and see it, but I believe it's mostly French.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us tonight, Michael. We're glad your brother and his bandmates are okay coming out of that horrifying situation. I want to go back to Brian Ross right here. And again, we don't know who's responsible for this at all, but when you hear about 1,500 people in a concert hall, an American band, President Francois Hollande at the game that evening, you think about the kind of targeting, the kind of planning that went into this.
Someone thought this through, and that's the point that investigators now will be looking at. Who had the ability to pull together 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 different terrorists with guns, with explosives, whether they're grenades or improvised explosive devices. That takes some planning. That's not done in a week or even a month in many cases. So this was thought out, and whether the big game between France and Germany was the trigger or this concert with the American rock band, it's hard to know, but clearly they picked their targets very well. And think about it, George, how many concerts tonight in this country with 1,000 people? And what kind of security? No security is going to be able to stop people with automatic weapons.
They all can't be protected. I want to go back to Martha Raddatz, our Chief Global Affairs Correspondent. And Martha, this campaign against ISIS going on for more than a year. Right now, the United States has stepped up air attacks on ISIS. You've seen the Iraqi military Kurds join that as well. The president now authorizing 50 special operations forces on the ground in Syria. But the group ISIS continues to grow and metastasize across the Middle East, even in Afghanistan.
They certainly do. And as you know, George, I was in Afghanistan about a month ago, and that was one of the concerns the commander there had, is that ISIS was starting to spread in places in Afghanistan as well. We don't really know whether they just take the name of ISIS, whether they just support ISIS, whether they're al-Qaeda offshoots, but they have begun to be a big problem in Afghanistan as well. But the bigger problem really right now is the kind of attack we're seeing tonight. Again, we don't know whether ISIS is involved, but it has all the earmarks of something ISIS might do. And you also have to think about how few people were probably involved. From the reports we've heard, where there are a couple of gunmen, where there are 5 or 6 gunmen, I think you could actually put this kind of attack together fairly quickly, because we're talking about soft targets. Those kinds of targets law enforcement fears so much, because in fact they are pretty easy targets. That's why they're called soft targets. So if they could get the weapons, if they could get some Kalashnikovs, if they could get some explosives, and you can learn how to do that online or anywhere else, they could probably carry this out fairly easily. If they have the motive to do that, they're going to go to those places that they think they can cause the most damage.
And on that point, Martha, I want to go back to our Chief Justice Correspondent, Pierre Thomas, because Pierre, I think a lot of American officials have been wondering why this hasn't happened more often here against those kinds of soft targets.
Exactly, George. Law enforcement officials have been worried about this so-called nightmare scenario, and it's why you've seen the FBI step up all these investigations throughout the year, looking at people who support ISIS and the like. 70 arrests in the last 2 years alone. Time and time again, officials seeing young people primarily trying to go join ISIS, teenagers in some cases, other people plotting to do attacks here at home. And George, I'm struck by a conversation I had at a panel in Chicago in recent weeks with a senior French national police official. And he talked about and in such solemn terms, the notion that they had dozens upon dozens of Islamic radicals in Paris and throughout his country that he had to worry about. And he had this look in his eye of a person who was living under the daily stress of it all, and it was quite stunning. And you see this unfold tonight, and you can see what he was so worried about.
The horror across France, so much horror here as well. Secretary of State John Kerry calling it a vile, heinous attack. But Brian Ross, Twitter accounts linked to jihadists are celebrating the attacks in Paris. They are also speculating about who may be responsible.
Absolutely. They're celebrating that they were able to paralyze a great city like Paris. Just this May, the French mission to the UN reported 1,700.
Okay, we want to go now back to France. The French President François Hollande is speaking.
Les terroristes sont capables de faire de telles atrocités. Ils doivent être certains qu'il y aura en face d'eux une France déterminée, une France unie, une France rassemblée et une France qui ne se laissera pas impressionner, même si aujourd'hui elle exprime une émotion infinie à l'égard de ce drame et de cette tragédie qui est une abomination parce que c'est une barbarie. Merci.
Voilà, le président de la République donc qui vient de prendre la
President
parole.
François Hollande on the scene near the Bataclan concert hall. I couldn't hear all of what he was saying, but talking about the horrific emotions so many of the French are feeling on this evening. And Brian Ross, you had some more reporting there.
Just the devastating attack, but what he knows and what his government knows is, and they reported this to the UN this May, there are 1,700 French citizens or residents of France who are considered to be on the ISIS track. 1,700, 470 of them in Syria, the rest still in France. Over 1,200 French citizens or residents considered to be on an ISIS track by French authorities.
I want to go back to Paris right now. Charlotte Brejo is on the phone right now. You were near the restaurant in the 10th arrondissement where one of the attacks took place?
Yes, that's right. I was eating with a friend of mine. We were just having our dinner. It was after 9 o'clock. And then all of a sudden there was really loud gunshots and bullets coming through the windows. So all the diners quickly fell to the floor, and we were lying on the floor while numerous gunshots were fired, and there was shards of glass coming at us through from the windows. I saw a woman next to me. I was holding on to her, actually, and I said, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Then the next woman to me said, "Is she breathing?" And as I lifted my head, because we had to keep our heads down, when I lifted my head to see if she was okay, I could see a pool of blood around her, and she'd been shot, I think, in the chest and was fatally wounded.
Oh, my goodness. That must have been so horrifying. How long did the shots continue for?
I would just say under a minute, but it felt like a long time. I know that it sounded like they'd reloaded their gun and then there was another round of shots. But it was, there were somewhere in the region, I would say, of 30 to 40 gunshots, but I don't know.
And could you tell how many shooters there were?
I would guess more than one, but I don't know, and I didn't see the shooters. I was just trying to keep my head down.
And did you get a sense of any other fatalities or injured?
Yeah, I saw, when I eventually could look up and have a look and see what was happening, I saw that there were some people covered in blood, maybe 3 or 4 more fatalities that I personally could see. As my friend and myself ran out of the restaurant, we saw a man holding his girlfriend, and she had been shot in the stomach. I could see she was bleeding and was also really fatally wounded. So it's been, quite bloody and tragic.
You're in a safe place now. What else can you tell us about the scene in Paris tonight, how it feels there?
It feels like a never-ending horror movie. It feels like first of all, it felt like it wasn't real when it happened. And I know everyone says this, but when these kind of things happen, you don't think it would ever happen to you. So initially, I didn't think I couldn't process it. And then when I heard more, when I heard reports about the hostage situation in Le Bataclan, it felt exactly how I felt during the time of Charlie Hebdo. It felt like this nightmare being inflicted, and it felt like there was no sense in what was happening. All I can say is that people were brave and that people are praying for each other. I guess that's all the good that I can say about it.
terror and trauma twice in just 10 months. Charlotte Breault, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that testimony tonight. And Brian Ross, before we go quickly right now, President Obama has said he will offer whatever help he can to the people of France. This will become a worldwide effort.
Absolutely. They'll go through every phone conversation, Twitter messages, all sorts of things to try to figure out who is responsible. Are there more still out there? Are follow-on attacks planned either in France or elsewhere in the world?
Okay, to summarize again right now, at least 100 people have been killed in Paris tonight, according to French police sources and the French media. 3 terrorists confirmed killed as well, according to the French police, in that situation in the concert hall where hostages had been held. The theater siege is over right now. The French President Hollande and the Prime Minister are on the scene, and they said the French people are standing unified against this terror attack. We're going to have a special edition of 2020 tonight with David Muir and Elizabeth Vargas. Stay with us. I'm George Stephanopoulos in New York.
This has been a special report from ABC News.